What's up, guys? We're gonna be brewing today. We're gonna be taking a look at the brewing steps that I do. Oh, you heard my burner just flame off because it hit the desired temperature on the HLT. It's a 3-burner setup, 2 pumps. Well, 3 pumps if you include the Sabco Chill Wizard, which I'll be honest with you guys is real expensive, but I'm a huge fan of. This is just pretty simple. A couple of PIDs. A couple of RTD probes and some T connectors, and it allows me to recirculate and have my mash system and my hot liquor tank, as automated as I would want it. I'm going to be mashing at about 154 degrees in my mash tun. You can see that I use false bottoms, and there's not a whole lot to them. And here's just recirculating water. And it's at temperature, so it's about ready to rock and roll. So let's load up the mash tun. It's about 20 pounds of 2-row pail. And it's a 1.25 pounds of Crystal 60 for a little darkening color. We're just doing a real generic IPA. We're going to make up for the lack of grain with the hops that we use. Okay, now you heard my system kick back on for a few seconds. That's because if you notice on the temperature, it's set at 160. I don't know if you can really see that too well, but I gave it a variable of 1/10 of a degree, so if it's within 1/10 of a degree, it doesn't turn on, so that keeps it from flaming on and off real fast. So now we're going to turn off the HLT pump. We're going to bring this connector over to the mash tun. Make sure our ball valve is closed. We're going to open it back up, turn on the pump, and at this point we're going to be bringing nice hot liquid into the mash tun via my homemade sparge arm. Just as a side note, I use pH 5.2 in my HLT tank. I found that it's a pretty good mix, and I'm kind of used to using it, so I don't mind it in my water at all. Meanwhile, we're still continuing the mash process here, just trying to get enough liquid in here. We'll get back to you when you're mashing. Alright, as you can see, it's time to mash. So I got my mash paddle out here, and we're just making sure there's no dough balls in the mash. Just trying to give it a nice even layer. Make sure all the grain gets utilized. The mashing process is very simple. At a certain temperature, all you're doing is taking the starches out of the grain and you are converting them into a sugar. Notice I hang my mash paddle, it never touches anything. And at this point, I'm going to add the last quart of water. Should have a little grain bed. Allow this to go back over to the HLT. You'll notice I use these quick disconnects pretty much everywhere. Makes life much easier. Now this system is a single infusion setup. Now you can step mash with this if you prefer, but I know what temperature I want to keep it at, so I'm going to set my temperature to 154. And these Auber instruments are, the most effective for the price. And now I'm going to open this valve. Open both valves. I'm going to get the air out of the system, evacuate as much as possible. Turn on that pump. Now you'll watch this temperature cruise up pretty quick. But I'm going to turn it on auto. So it ignites the burner down there as required. I'm just using Honeywell gas valves off old HVAC units. I think you can purchase them for $40–50 a piece. But meanwhile, I'm done with my I'm pretty much done with my hot liquor tank for a while, so I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to turn that back on in about 30 minutes and let it start heating up to about 170 degrees to sparge. You can already see the color in the hose change. You can see it gets more of an amber, kind of a amber color as that grain gets infused. But I pretty much recirculate at all times. It allows me to skip a few steps in the future. It does a couple of things for me. One, it allows to have a real uniform temperature across the entire pot. There's no hot spots, cold spots, because the water is continuously recirculating. Second, it allows me to skip a boil off. I don't have to worry about any grain or anything being in the bottom of the sediment and having it flow out first. It's pretty much constantly recirculating, so the grain is literally self-packing on top as the water replaces itself. I use these big jet burners. They work real well for me. I haven't had a problem with them yet. They're also low pressure, so I get a lot of use out of my propane tank. You can see that I dropped down a little lower than I wanted to. I need to be at about 154, but you know what? This will heat up pretty quick with that big gas on it. So we'll check in. Okay, so it's only been about 15 minutes, but just checking in. You see that my mash tun temperature dropped a hair, so it's going to kick on the burner and raise itself back up to 140. Yep, just kicked on. And my HLT is just kind of staying. I added a little more purified water and a little more 5.2, so it dropped in temperature pretty substantially because it's a nice balmy 50 degrees out today. Somebody's calling. Don't care. And you can tell by the color of the hose now that the mash is well within process and it's getting started here. So we'll check back in here in about 15 minutes. Alright, got about halfway through. You can see that the color of the hose is changed a nice amber color. That's probably going to end up being the finished color of the beer. You can see that I do have my boil kettle hooked up to the Savco Chill Wizard. Big fan. I love how they use the stainless steel aeration stone through the HEPA filtration system to help oxygenate the wort. It goes right from there into either my conical fermenters, but today, since I'm going to be using two different kinds of yeast, I'm going to be putting them in 2 6-gallon carboys. Got a little left over. Saved a little bit of the cake from some W1056 and some Safal US05. Both are good for, IPAs, American Pale Ales. All right, we'll check back in. Starting at the 30-minute mark, I'm going to turn this up to about 170 degrees for the sparge process. But as of right now, everything's kind of running itself. You can watch these burners just turn on and off as they need to. Alright, as you can see, we're running out of time on our mash here. I already heated up my HLT to my sparge temperature of 171 degrees. That'll kind of fluctuate around there. My mash is a third of a degree over right now, but that's just because the burner just fired to creep it back up to my mash temp. What we're going to do now is, because this has had a full hour for mash, we're going to check and see if the conversion of starches is done. And an easy way to do that is to just steal just a little bit of the wort, put it on a plate here, and we're going to use a iodophor, which is primarily an iodine sanitizer. And we're going to take just a drop or two, and what we're looking for is the presence of dark purple colors. Okay, so I don't see any purples in there, so looks like my conversion process is probably about complete. Okay, any purples or dark browns in there, and you're not quite done, but that's a nice even color. I don't see any of the traditional marks of having any starches left over there. You know, another way to tell is just to taste it. If it's real sweet, you know your conversion process from starches to sugars is probably done. So, you know, I started this a little later than I probably should have. So, and this little cheap timer is a really good investment for a brewer if you don't have another way to do it. So at this point, I'm going to turn off both pumps. I'm going to close the HLT tank and the mash tun valve. Notice a little air evacuated into both lines. That's fine with me. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this line and move it over to my boil kettle. You can see the inside of my boil kettle has what I like to refer to as a whirlpool and a false bottom. People always ask, why do you use a false bottom on your boil kettle? Well, the reason being is it's easier to clean when I'm done. Okay, so we've got my pump now feeding from the mash tun into the boil kettle. And now I'm going to take, actually let me turn both of those off. Now I'm going to take my water source from my sparge process over to my mash tun. And the trick is to keep a nice little bed of water. As I'm draining the water through the grain bed, I don't want it to drain any one space because water will always naturally take the easiest way out, which is straight down. So I want to keep about an inch of water on top. So to do that, I'm just going to crack this open so I can see it. And I'm going to do the same here. Now I'm going to open this about halfway, and I'm going to open this all the way. So what should be happening is more water should be flowing into the mash tun than should be coming out of the mash tun. So let's turn on both. So now if you notice that while I'm draining, I'm not actually draining it past the top of the grain bed. I'm allowing the water to sink over the entire grain bed. And that'll give me a much nicer first running. Okay, this is sparge. And once I get all of the wort into the boil kettle, we'll come back and talk. Okay, now I've got the wort all transferred over to the boil kettle. I got about 13.5 gallons. Should boil down to about 10 when I'm finished. And now we're just gonna light the boil kettle. There's nothing fancy about this burner. It literally just burns, so I don't have it hooked up automatically. Now basically, well, this is getting up to temperature. I need to get it up to about 212 degrees. And while I'm waiting for it to get up to temperature, I'm going to start the cleaning process and have these two, the hot liquor tech and the mash tun cleaned out and have everything put away and ready to roll. Because I'm really kind of done with them for now. The only thing I'm going to do is once this gets up to boiling, we'll start with our hops additions and we'll check back in. Alright. Coming up to temperature, we're about 190. You can start seeing this hop break starting to form on top. What we're going to do is we're going to take this hop break off. It's just sanitizer. I always keep some mixed up. I'm just going to let that... Actually, it's a big soup ladle is what it is, but it works great for taking off the hop brake. You know, I don't know how to get that much water up to a boil any quicker than using those big turbo burners. Okay, as you can see, I got a slow, steady rolling boil. And I turned my flame way down. Got it barely just cracked open on the ball valve, because frankly, that's all I need. And we're going to start our first hops addition. We're going to start our timer. Set it for 30 minutes. Our first hops addition is going to be an ounce of Magnum and an ounce of Pearl. I go right into the wort. I don't worry about putting it in bags or anything because I use that false bottom. I prefer pellet hops to whole hops, or I prefer pellets because they tend to be a little more consistent instead of the whole hops, maybe even the plugs. I'm going to let that sit in there for 30 minutes. Again, I always keep a real light dilution of sanitizer just kind of ready to go for anything that I need to stick in the beer. True, it's going to be boiled for an hour, but still, I prefer to be clean. We'll check back in a half hour with our next hops edition. I set up the chill wizard. Got it all ready to go. We got it coming out of the boil kettle into the inlet on the pump. Runs through the plate chiller, comes up to the stainless steel oxygen stone, which gets fed by a little aquarium pump and a HEPA filter, and then it gets sent out of the tube. We can keep one pass on this goes from boiling to about 65 degrees, so it's a very efficient form of chilling, and it was definitely worth the money. Okay, we're coming up on the 10-minute mark, so I pulled out my W yeast nutrient. I like using this, especially because I take the hop brake off. I feel that adding a little nutrient back in for the yeast is probably a good idea. You don't use much of it. We use about a half tablespoon for every 5 gallons, since we're ended up with about, we just call it a tablespoon. So what I usually do is just fill up the bottom of the cap, and I've measured it enough that that's about the right amount. And just sprinkle that in there a few minutes before the end of the boil, in this case about 10. Okay, now interesting little problem going on here. I must have started with a little too much water in the boil kettle, because my gravity is a little off, and I'm checking my gravity with a standard refractometer. Basically it measures in Play-Doh, but or bricks, and we can convert it over to the standard unit measurement so we can figure out what our original gravity is. But frankly, it's too low. Okay, so it's only about a 1.045. I need it to be at a 1.050. So I'm going to end up boiling this thing. I'm going to set my timer for an additional 10 minutes. And then I'm going to check it again. And the point behind that is the longer you boil it, the more water vapor is going to evaporate, and it's going to leave you with a higher gravity solution. So even though it's been an hour, sometimes you got to check, and it may not be done according to your recipe. And so in this instance, I checked, and it needs to go for another, probably 10 minutes. So I'm going to let it go for 10 minutes, and we'll check it again. All right, we hit our gravity. Our boil is done. We're going to turn off our burner. Time to chill it and get it in fermenters, or in this case, carboys. This Savco Chill Wizard's pretty amazing. What we're going to do is we're going to take boiling wort. I'm going to open up this valve. I'm going to let the flow of wort go into the pre-chamber, if you will, for the pump. I closed off this valve just because I want to evacuate as much air as possible from this line in order to effectively prime the pump. I already have cool water running from a hose. It runs in this end, out this end to a planter, so that the pump is effectively ready to go. The chill wizard is effectively ready to go. The oxygenation system is ready to go. I'm just going to evacuate as much air as I can. Okay, we've evacuated enough air, and we're going to send it into this fermenter. Okay, so with one pass on this system, we're cooling it to about 72 degrees. And as it stabilizes, we'll be able to go a little faster. Now keep in mind, I'm running the oxygen stone, and it is a stainless steel stone attached to a little aquarium pump. So you can see the bubbles that are here, but they are not in the line going into the system. We're going to fill these up and check back in.